welcome back to my channel. For the first video I'm filming, sitting down and filming in my new office. The last two videos I've filmed in here have been very much about unboxing and organising my books. It's nice to be able to take a little seat in front of my bookcases, which I'm in love with, and film a good old-fashioned book haul. However, this is a very specific book haul, which you can probably tell from the title. I was recently at the Hay-on-Wye Literature Festival, as my jumper can tell you. I did buy myself a souvenir besides books. As a speaker, I gave a talk inspired by my most recent children's book, Goddesses and Heroines, and the event itself was wonderful. I had such a fun time at the festival and in Hay, and naturally I bought a few books. So if you're not familiar with Hay-on-Wye, it is a town on the Welsh border, which is a bookshop town. So it is chock-a-block with bookshops, second-hand, new mixture of the two: poetry, children's, adults, crime, LGBTQ+, a bunch of different themed bookshops. And I do have a ton of footage from the town itself, which I do plan on making into a video tour of Hay-on-Wye. That may already be up, or maybe coming up after this video. It depends how my schedule works out. But it was beautiful. I'd never been before. I've actually never been to Wales, so this was my first time in Wales, and I do need to spend more time there. I'm also super tempted to go back to Hay-on-Wye outside of festival times, because the bookshops aren't just there during the festival, right? Like, this is a bookshop town all year round, and I'm not even sure I managed to go inside every single bookshop, yet I still managed to go in so many, and it was so much fun. I was there with my partner. We had a great time exploring the town, exploring all the little shops, including the non-bookshop related ones. I also got to meet up with some friends from TikTok, Elle and Katrina, who I will link down below for you to check out because they're absolutely wonderful creators. But what I'm essentially beating around the bush is that I bought some books. My first book haul since I moved into my new place, and what better place to have picked up some books than in one of Britain's 3 bookshop towns. There is in fact actually a bookshop town in Scotland, Wales and England, so all 3 countries on the mainland, and I've been to the Scottish one, the Welsh one now, and I need to go to the English one next. But yeah, I bought some books. Chris also bought some books, and I did a poll on Instagram, and the consensus was that you'd also like to see his books, since living together means we're meshing all of our books on the bookcases together. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to read all of his books or he's going to read all of mine, but I'm certainly interested in some of them, so I will share all of those with you after I've shared the books I specifically purchased, and I'll let you know whatever I do know about them and whether I plan on reading them or not. So the first book is the most expensive book in this pile, and it very aptly matches my jumper, which is a Folio Society edition. So I got this in one of the antiquarian bookshops in Hay, and if you're not familiar, Folio is a publisher who doesn't publish new work, but they publish classics and modern classics, popular books, old popular books, some lesser known older books, in beautiful editions. Each one is accompanied by beautiful artwork, whether it's photography or illustrations or paintings, etc. on the inside by a variety of different artists, and they're just gorgeous. I do have a small collection that I'm building up, and this one I couldn't leave behind because it is Perrault's Fairy Tales, illustrated by Edmund Dulac. And if you're not familiar, Charles Perrault is a French fairy tale writer and folklorist, and I don't actually own a straightforward translation of his work, so not only is this just like a beautiful book to have, it's also one that in this format I don't have in my collection, so it felt like a very useful purchase. That's my excuse. But let's be honest, you want to see what's inside, right? So this is the cover, which has lots of lovely detail on it alone, which I love. I love when the outside hardbacks have detail as well. And then some of Dulac's paintings inside. This is one from Cinderella, which is a fairy tale that you probably know. Charles Perrault has written versions of quite a few well-known fairy tales that you may know his versions from, so like Cinderella. Bluebeard, I love the fairy tale Bluebeard. It's very creepy, but I love it. Sleeping Beauty, although I have found a little mark there on one of the pages, but that's okay, they don't need to be in perfect condition. It is gorgeous, it's in great condition, and I can't wait to add it to my folio collection. Will you go in, please? Side note that's just occurred to me actually, if you'd like a video where I just show you in detail all of my Folio Society editions, let me know because I could totally film that. I then picked up a book in the Poetry Bookshop, which is a bookshop dedicated exclusively to selling poetry. It sells both second hand and new, and I bought a new book published by Blood Axe, which is Tishani Doshi's Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods. Now, I have not been reading as much poetry as I used to. Like, I go through phases with my reading, and I used to like consume poetry regularly, you know, every month I was reading at least one poetry book, and I loved it, and I still love poetry, but once you get out of the habit of something, right, like sometimes it can be a little bit harder to jump back in. So I knew I wanted to pick up a new poetry collection, but didn't really know where to start unless I bought something by a poet I'd already read before, and I wanted to try someone new. So I messaged my friend Jen, who is my poetry expert, and she sent me a whole list of recommendations, and I looked for what ones that the poetry bookshop had, and I read the blurbs, and I sort of went with the one that spoke to me the most, which was this one, and I'm really, really excited to read it. Poetry is always a bit of a mystery if you've never read a poet before, jumping into it, so I don't know much more than the recommendation and the little bits I read when flicking through it, but I'm really excited, and like I said, I very much trust Jen. I've got a ton of incredible poetry recommendations from her in the past, plus the poet is Welsh, so I feel like that's appropriate for my visit to Wales. I then picked up a children's picture book, and this is Lena and the Lord of the Toadstools, which is written by Miriam Damen and Nicholas Deegard and is illustrated by Julia Sarda. And I've actually picked up and read another book by these writers and illustrators before, which is The Wolf Secret, and I thought this was incredibly beautiful that I knew I had to pick this one up when I saw it. It is stunning. Like, this is an absolute work of art, which is true of a lot of children's books. Like, adults, if you're not reading children's books, what are you doing? Because it is an experience. Look at that artwork. There's another little example there. I really hope this is focusing, but it's pretty representative of what the cover looks like as well. And the blurb on the back of this one reads, "That forest has eyes and ears. That forest is haunted." One night, Lena's friend Orin doesn't return from the forest. She goes in search of him and meets the mysterious Lord of the Toadstools. Can this strange creature help her find Orin, or is he hiding a darker secret? And something I took away from the previous book by these collaborators that I read is that they can be a little bit dark, and they can touch on quite serious emotional themes, but I really, really enjoy that, and it's quite a magical, mystical journey going through those illustrations and stories together. So really excited to read this one. From the same bookshop, I also picked up this book, which is The Witch's Garden, Plants in Folklore, Magic and Traditional Medicine, published by the Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew. So this is actually, can I reach it? Just a book in a series I already have one in. So this is The Witch's Forest, Trees in Magic, Folklore and Traditional Remedies, and there is one more in the series about mushrooms, which I really want because I obviously want the whole collection. And I find these books really interesting. Like, my knowledge of the natural world, plant life, biology, zoology, etc. is something I'm always looking to grow. I find it a really fascinating topic, but I don't consider myself particularly well versed in it, so I'm always picking up books here and there and learning little bits here and there, and I find these books really interesting, or at least I find this book really interesting, because it'll tell you about a tree, for example. It'll tell you about the scientific side of that tree's life, it'll tell you about the historical side of that tree's life, and also kind of the traditional meaning of that tree to cultures and places that is native to it. And I really like that blending of like kind of folklore traditions, history and science in one, and learning about the natural world from that perspective and kind of how much the natural world has always meant to us. I find that really interesting. So obviously I was really interested in picking up this one, which is on more general plants, although are trees not plants? Smaller plants, I guess. And they are published by Kew, so I trust them because they are botanical experts, being a botanical gardens. The author of both is Sandra Lawrence. I just realised I should really show you what the inside of this book looks like as well, because there's lots of photos and illustrations. I love traditional or like old-fashioned sort of flora and fauna illustrations. They remind me of the gardening books I remember seeing in my granny's house when I was a kid. Like, aren't they gorgeous? I then picked up Deeping It, Colonialism, Culture and Criminalisation of UK Drill from Hay-on-Wye, which is the latest bookshop, I believe, to open in Hay-on-Wye, and from the title you can probably already guess, it is an LGBTQIA bookshop, and oh, I loved it. It was just such a beautiful bookshop, and I need to go back. Like, I need to go back to Hay-on-Wye in general. The staff were so lovely, the owner was so lovely. I loved it there, and they even stocked all the violet tiaras, so I decided to pick up another little 404 inkling whilst I was there. I almost have a complete collection of these, I believe, but I didn't have this one, which is about the music genre or subculture of drill music, which is not something I know much about. But that's what I like about these little books, is you learn about subjects you either don't know anything about, or you get to expand your perspective on a subject you are interested in, or a sort of pop culture thing you're interested in, like the one on Schitt's Creek, which I go on and on and on about. But I will read the blurb of this one to you because it sounds very, very interesting. Deeping It analyses Drill's fight against moral panic and its fraught relationship with the police and political authority in the UK, exemplified by constant censorship, racism and moments such as when a drill duo became the first people in British legal history to receive a prison sentence for simply performing a song. Utterly terrifying. And I'm not saying that this is what this book specifically is about, but given that we're living in a time in the UK where there are constant threats of and the reality of cracking down on political protests and political free speech and people's ability to stand up for what they believe in and to demonstrate, it's something we need to be talking about. Policing, policy and criminalisation are the cornerstones of colonial suppression. Art, self-expression and collective action are beacons of resistance. Deeping It places drill firmly in the latter category, tracing its production and criminalisation across borders and eras of the British Empire, exploring drill's artistic singularity but also its inherent threat as a black art form in a world that prioritises whiteness. Intervening on this discourse steeped in anti-blackness, this inkling deeps how the criminalisation of UK drill cannot be disentangled from histories, technologies and realities of colonialism and consumerism. Then lastly, for my personal haul, aside from the book I bought my mum as a souvenir, it's two books in the same series. So this is book 1 and book 2 in Kimberly Lemming's fantasy romance series. So the first book in the series is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, and the second one is That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. Now I've actually read this book. I read this one on Kindle. Yes, I read them out of order. Have we met? They are obviously about different protagonists in the same world, two friends in a world that very much reminds me of D&D. Like, this is like if you're into romantic D&D subplots, then these books are for you, because this is like D&D romance as far as I'm concerned as a reader, and I really enjoyed this. I found it very like entertaining, humorous, endearing in the romantic aspects and adventurous in terms of the sort of magical adventure subplot. So I have been meaning to read book 1, and there is a book 3 which I didn't pick up, but this was the first time I'd seen these books in person since they got picked up by traditional publishing and received new covers, and I couldn't resist. I think they're beautiful, and I decided to pick up both the one I've read and the one that I haven't. So I'm gonna read book 1 ASAP and then probably at some point pick up book 3, but yeah, these are fantastic. Then as promised, let us have a look at Chris's books. So the first one I am definitely going to read because it sounds so good. It still has a price sticker on it though, so I'm going to take that off, and that is The Ghost Slayers: Thrilling Tales of Occult Detection, edited by Mike Ashley, and this is part of the British Library's Tales of the Weird series. So there's a whole range of these with these equally creepy two-tone covers that are either sort of detective or horror or a mishmash of the both, as this one is, and these are creepy occult detective stories. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? And it's an anthology of classic tales. So for example, some of the authors we have in here are Joseph Byrne-Brennan, oh, that seagull came very close to the window there, Algernon Blackwood, William Hope Hodgson, Claude and Alice Askew. I haven't read a single one of these authors before, so that's really exciting because obviously it means that if I enjoy their story in this anthology, I can check out what else they have written in the past. But I love crime fiction, I love horror, and obviously Chris does too because he picked it up and now I get to read it too. This is definitely one of the massive benefits of moving in with your partner, merging libraries and having even more books. This is what it's all about, guys. So yeah, I'm really excited to read this one. And Chris generally did actually go very much on the sci-fi route, I will say. So we have a couple of sci-fi classics from the Sci-Fi Masterwork series. Again, stickers on them, including H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, which is a sci-fi classic. I'm not sure I particularly have much of an interest in reading this. It's never been on my kind of TBR pile, but Chris is very much trying to work through a lot of the classic sci-fi novels, so a lot of the novels in the Gallant's SFF Masterwork series, which are these ones with the yellow spines. So he also picked up The Body Snatchers by Jack Finney, which of the two I'm probably more interested in. I can't say I would be picking it up anytime soon unless one of you convince me in the comments down below, but I'm definitely more intrigued by this one. And we actually already have a huge selection of SFF Masterworks that I inherited from my dad because he was really into the SFF Masterworks, but these were two that he didn't have, so Chris decided to add these to the collection. Then Chris picked up a book I'm definitely going to be reading. We might even read this together, and that is The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers, which is the fourth and final book in, I've forgotten what the series is called, the Wayfarer Chronicles or the Wayfarer books? Wayfarer series, okay. The first of which is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. And Becky Chambers is one of my favourite sci-fi writers of all time, one of my favourite contemporary writers at the moment, to be perfectly honest. Love Becky Chambers' work so much. It's so hopeful, which not a lot of sci-fi is, right? Like, it can be very dystopian and quite sort of pessimistic. Sometimes you need a little bit of hope, so I really enjoy that, and I love The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I read it, loved it, on the recommendation of my friend Tasman, passed it along to Chris, who read it and loved it, and now neither of us have actually read any more of the series, but I own books 2 and 3, so he has added book 4 to that, and we now have the complete collection, and we need to get to reading them. Then last but not least, Chris picked up Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, which I think is more of a fantasy than a sci-fi novel. Now, I have read a couple of Neil Gaiman books, actually maybe 3 or 4 Neil Gaiman books, and I have enjoyed them all, but personally I've never necessarily been drawn to this book. Like, I'm just being honest here. I love Stardust, I love Coraline, but I've never had much of an inclination to read this one, but Chris decided to pick up, so like maybe I will eventually if he says it's good. The blurb says, when Richard Mayhew stops to help a girl he finds bleeding in the street, his unremarkable life changes in an instant. This act of kindness leads him to a place filled with murderers and angels, pale girls in black velvet, a beast in a labyrinth, and an earl who holds court in a tube train. It is strangely familiar, yet utterly bizarre. Here is London below, the city of people who have fallen between the cracks, and for Richard Mayhew, it's just the beginning. I mean, that does sound really interesting. I will give him that. That does sound really interesting. So I think those are all the books we picked up for ourselves between us, although if you're interested, this is a book I picked up for my mum, since I did just mention that I bought her one, and that is Voyaging Out, British Women Artists from Suffrage to the 60s. And if you don't know, my mum is a designer and an artist, and she loves art books, and sometimes I find it a little bit difficult to pick art books for somebody that obviously knows so much more about art than I do, but this seems like a broad enough subject and covering enough artists, but on the theme of them being women, that I'm sure she'll enjoy it and take something away from it. So yeah, it's also pretty beautiful. But that really is all the books I had to show you. I hope you've enjoyed this little book haul in my new setup. Now, don't be fooled by the neatness behind me. I'm surrounded by piles and boxes and mess still. It's just all on the floor and you can't see it, so there's plenty of work to be done, but I've got plenty to read in between, which is always a good thing. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in that video all about Hay-on-Wye, the place, then the video should either already be up or it will be the next video up after this, I promise. So yeah, have a look for that or keep an eye out for that. No idea what's going on, to be honest. And I'd love to know which of these books you think I should start by reading, the ones I haven't already, and if there's any that you are interested in reading or have loved in the past. But until next time, happy reading. I'll see you all again soon. Bye everyone.